I thought I had won, not because I was strong, but because he was silent. There are victories you celebrate with noise, with banners, with crowds, with blood that still steams in the air. And then there are victories you celebrate with something colder, with stillness, with the kind of quiet that makes hope feel childish. That was the kind of victory I believed I had. I watched the darkness swallow the sky. I watched the crowd turn their faces away when the weight of it became too heavy to stare at. I watched him hang there, bruised, torn, breathing in shallow waves, and I told myself, over and over, like a prayer twisted into a curse, this is it. The cross looked like defeat. Friday felt final. And Saturday was my proof. No thunder, no fire. No voice from heaven splitting the air like judgment. Just a sealed tomb and a world learning to live without him. I waited for the silence to last. But then, Sunday morning came, and the first thing I felt wasn't fear. It was something worse. It was the moment I realized the war didn't end on the cross. It started there. Stay with me, because what happened next wasn't just a miracle, it was my collapse. You think you know how darkness works, you think it's loud, dramatic, obvious, but I've learned something about humans, about you, and about the way despair spreads. Despair doesn't need to shout, it just needs time. Time to whisper in your ear when you're alone. Time to replay your worst moment until it feels like a prophecy. Time to turn one loss into a story you can't escape. That's what I do. I don't always break you with one blow. I break you with a slow certainty that nothing can change. And that's why I loved Friday night. Because the moment he breathed his last, I felt the shift in the world. It wasn't just grief. It was surrender. That heavy, bitter surrender humans offer when they stop believing in rescue. You call it realism. You call it acceptance. You call it moving on. I call it my kingdom. But if you want to understand why I thought I had won, you have to go back, not just to the cross, but to the garden. Gethsemane, even the name feels like pressure. I remember that night because I expected something different. I expected fire. I expected an army. I expected him to finally do what humans always begged him to do, to prove himself in the way they could applaud. I expected him to fight, because that's how the world measures strength, by resistance, by domination, by the ability to make others bleed. I was counting on that. I was counting on pride. I was counting on panic. I was counting on the disciples to finally stop pretending they were brave and show what they really were when the shadows moved. And the shadows did move. He went there after supper. He walked like a man carrying more than a body can hold, but still moving, still choosing each step. The air was cool. The night had that strange, sharp clarity, like the world knew it was about to witness something it could never unsee. He took them with him. They followed, sleepy, confused, swollen with confidence they hadn't earned. They didn't understand what was coming, but I did. I hovered close to that garden, like a vulture waiting for a heart to stop beating. And then he did the one thing I didn't want him to do. He got low, he prayed. Not the kind of prayer that performs for an audience, not the kind that sounds polished. This wasn't poetry. This was a man pressing his face to the earth, asking for a way out. You have no idea what it meant to me to hear that, because in that moment I thought, yes, there it is, the crack, the weakness. He knows. He knows exactly what's coming, and he doesn't want it. That's where I thrive. In the space between what you know is right and what you feel you can endure. That space is where most humans die long before they're buried. So I leaned into that night. I pressed the air heavier. I let dread settle like fog. I wanted him to feel the full weight of what obedience would cost. And he did. His friends kept falling asleep. Their bodies betrayed their promises. Their eyes shut while history shook. Their courage melted into dreams. Perfect. This is how I win, I thought. Not with swords, with weakness, with weariness, with the lonely knowledge that even the ones closest to you can't stay awake when you're bleeding inside. He stood up and came back to them. I watched his face, not rage, not disgust, something softer, something that should not have been present in a night like that. Compassion. He woke them, warned them, and went back again. And again. 3 times. 3 times the same battle. You call that perseverance, I call it a countdown, because every time he went back, the decision solidified. I could feel it in the air. He wasn't negotiating anymore. He was surrendering, not to me, but to the will of his father. And that terrified me, though I would never admit it, because there is one kind of power I cannot corrupt. A will that has already decided. A heart that has already accepted the cost. That's why I needed him to run before the decision was complete. That's why I needed the panic to rise and push him away from the path. So I moved the pieces. Judas was already mine in the way humans become mine, not through horns and flames, but through a slow agreement with bitterness. A wound that never healed. A disappointment that turned into entitlement. A man who thought he deserved more than he was given. I didn't have to scream at Judas. I only had to remind him what he believed, that he had been overlooked, underappreciated, used. Humans will betray anything for the feeling of being seen. So Judas came, not alone. Torches, soldiers, temple guards, footsteps, the sound of metal and urgency. The garden filled with movement like a nightmare turning real. And when they approached, I expected chaos. I expected the disciples to swing first, to panic, to make it violent, to make it ugly enough that the story would rot. They did swing. One of them did. There was a flash, a shout, a blade, and I smiled. Yes, make it messy, I thought. Make it sinful. Make it human. But then he did it again, that thing I couldn't stand. He stopped it. He restrained them. He healed what had been wounded. He didn't let their fear become the shape of his mission. You have any idea what it's like to watch someone refuse the weapon you gave them? That moment in Gethsemane wasn't just an arrest. It was a revelation. He wasn't being taken like a helpless victim. He was offering himself like a sacrifice. And that's when I realized my only remaining strategy was speed. If I could rush the world into believing it was over, if I could press grief into certainty, then even if some miracle happened later would feel like fantasy. Because humans don't just need facts, they need hope. And hope is fragile when it's been crushed, so they led him away, and his friends scattered like smoke. Perfect. I followed the procession through the night, not with feet, not with breath, but with attention. I watched the accusations pile up. I watched lies be accepted because they were convenient. I watched authority protect itself and call it righteousness. Nothing new. Human systems have always been my favorite instruments. They don't even realize they're playing my song. Then morning came, and with it the inevitable machinery of execution. The cross. You look back on it now with polished theology, with stained glass and songs. But I saw it raw. I saw splinters. I saw swollen faces. I saw nails. I saw a man who had done nothing deserving of that kind of death, and a world eager to see him broken. If you want to understand why I believed Friday was victory, understand this. I didn't just want him dead. I wanted him disgraced. Because death ends a life. Disgrace poisons a legacy. Disgrace makes people ashamed to say they belong to you. It makes them hide. It makes them doubt their own memories. I wanted the disciples to look at the cross and feel stupid for ever believing. I wanted every healed person, every forgiven sinner, every hopeful prayer to feel naive. And for a moment, it worked. The crowd mocked. The leaders sneered. Even one of the criminals beside him hurled words like stones, and I watched him and waited for him to break in the way humans break. To curse, to panic, to call down fire. To prove he was who he claimed to be by destroying those who doubted. That would have been my favorite ending, because it would have turned him into just another ruler, another ego, another god in the human image. But he didn't. Instead, he did something that made my skin crawl. He forgave. He spoke compassion from a place of agony. He offered mercy while choking on pain. And worst of all, he trusted his Father even when the sky went dark. I felt the darkness, yes, I was there. I welcomed it. I pressed it deeper. I wanted the earth to swallow hope. But even in that darkness, something remained in him that I could not extinguish. A steadiness, not the steadiness of comfort, the steadiness of commitment. And then he died. He died. And when the final breath left him, I expected heaven to scream, I expected angels to descend, I expected judgment to strike. But there was only silence. Glorious, thick, satisfying silence. Do you know what silence does to humans? Silence makes them interpret. Silence makes them fill the gaps with their worst fears. Silence makes them believe the story they already suspect. That God leaves, that God fails, that God was never truly there. So I went to work. I moved through the city like a cold wind. I curled around the disciples, hiding behind locked doors. I sat in the corners of their thoughts and whispered, "You were wrong. You followed a dead man. You wasted your life. You're next." And I could feel their courage collapse. Not because they didn't love him. Because love without hope becomes torture. Then came the burial. I watched Joseph, a man with status, a man with reputation, risk everything to ask for the body. I watched the hurried wrapping. I watched the stone rolled into place. A sealed tomb is a beautiful thing to me, because it turns hope into a location. It makes victory feel physical. It makes the end look undeniable. And then the Sabbath came. Saturday, the day I still remember with a smile that tastes like ash, because Saturday is where faith goes to die, not in a dramatic explosion, but in the slow, suffocating absence of answers. No miracles, no appearances, no voices, just grief, just regret. Just that terrible human question, what do we do now? I watched them. Mary with her tears that didn't stop, John with that haunted stillness of someone who saw too much and could do nothing. Peter, broken by his own cowardice, replaying every moment he should have been brave. The others, scattered, afraid, trying to make sense of a future that suddenly looked empty. And then there were the women, stubborn, faithful, determined to honor him even in death. That bothered me, because when humans keep loving after they've lost, they become dangerous. Love is not always a warm thing. Sometimes love is defiance, and defiance is the first crack in despair. So I leaned harder. I whispered to them that their devotion was pointless, that the tomb was the last word, that the story ended in blood and wood and stone. And for most of Saturday, the world agreed with me. That's why I thought I had won, because I mistook silence for surrender. I mistook a closed tomb for a closed story. I mistook the absence of light for the triumph of darkness. And if you've ever been in a season where God felt absent, where nothing moved, where prayers fell like stones, you know how convincing Saturday can be. Saturday makes you believe you'll never laugh again. Saturday makes you believe the pain is permanent. Saturday makes you believe that what you lost is gone forever. I have built whole empires on Saturdays, and that's why Sunday morning felt like betrayal. It began before the sun rose. The world was still dim, still cool, still half asleep. The city hadn't even fully woken up to its own sorrow. And the women went to the tomb. I followed them, not because I suspected resurrection, not at first, because I wanted to savor their disappointment. I wanted to watch them arrive with spices and find a sealed stone and feel the finality land like a blade. I wanted to drink their grief. But as they walked, something unsettled the air. Have you ever felt it? That strange pressure before something breaks. Like the atmosphere is holding its breath, I felt it, and I ignored it. Because arrogance is my oldest habit. They reached the tomb, and the stone. The stone was not where it should have been. The opening yawned like a wound in the earth. The place that should have held death was open, and suddenly my victory felt thin. The women panicked. Confusion surged, questions collided. Where is he? Who moved it? Why would anyone do this? And I told myself, it's theft, it's chaos, it's human cruelty. But something inside me, something I hate, recognized another possibility. Then came the running, footsteps pounding the earth, breaths tearing at lungs. John and Peter sprinting toward the tomb like men chasing the last thread of meaning left in their lives. I watched John arrive first, bending, staring into the opening, hesitation and dread twisting together. Peter rushing past, reckless, desperate, unwilling to wait. And then, the linens. Not ripped, not scattered like a robbery. Placed, ordered. A strange calm inside the evidence. And that's when I felt it. Not fear. Not yet. Something colder. The realization that this wasn't a human disruption. This wasn't someone stealing a body. This was the signature of intention. This was not chaos. This was victory, and I hated it, because it meant the cross was not the end. It meant the tomb was not the final word. It meant death had been treated like a door, and someone had walked through it. Sunday morning didn't explode with fireworks. It didn't announce itself like the kind of spectacle humans crave. It unfolded like dawn, quiet, inevitable, unstoppable. It broke the darkness not with violence, but with presence. And the worst part, of the part I still choke on, is that resurrection didn't just undo Friday, it redefined it. If he stayed dead, the cross would have been humiliation. But if he rose, then the cross was not humiliation. It was strategy. It was love with teeth. It was a decision made in a garden and carried out through agony. It was the will of heaven refusing to abandon humanity, even when humanity nailed heaven to wood. Do you see what that means? It means I didn't win on Friday. I played my part in his plan. And I have never hated anything more than being used for good, because all my work depends on one belief, that darkness is final. Resurrection turns that belief into a lie. Resurrection is not just hope. Resurrection is an announcement that endings can be overturned, that guilt can be forgiven, that shame can be washed away, that the grave is not a locked room, that the worst thing is not the last thing. That's why Sunday morning is dangerous, because it doesn't just comfort you, it challenges you. It says, you cannot build your identity on your failure anymore. You cannot worship your pain anymore. You cannot call your despair truth anymore. Because if he rose, then your story has a future, even when your present feels like a funeral. That's what I didn't understand. I thought humans would see the cross and collapse forever. But humans are strange. Humans can be crushed and still get up if they believe they're loved. And that is the one thing I cannot counterfeit. I can imitate miracles. I can imitate religion. I can imitate power, but I cannot imitate love that goes all the way through death. I watched Mary stand there weeping, thinking everything had been stolen, and then hearing her name spoken like a key turning in a lock. I watched the grief shift into shock. I watched disbelief crumble into joy. And every time someone's eyes widened with that realization, he's alive, called something in my kingdom cracked. Because I rely on you thinking God is distant. I rely on you thinking heaven is silent. I rely on you thinking your prayers die in the air. But Sunday morning says heaven moves even when you can't see it. Sunday morning says the silence was not abandonment, it was preparation. And here's the part you won't expect me to say, but I will, because truth is the sharpest weapon, and I need you to feel it. Some of you are living in Saturday right now, your own Saturday. That day between promise and fulfillment, between prayer and answer, between loss and restoration. You feel the stone, you feel the sealed place, you feel the heaviness. And I have been whispering to you the same thing I whispered to them. It's over. Stop hoping, stop praying, stop trusting. But Sunday morning exposes my whisper for what it is. A lie. Because the stone can move, the tomb can open, the story can turn when you least expect it. And I hate that because it means you can survive me, it means you can outlast me. It means you can stare at your worst day and still believe it's not the last chapter. Do you know what resurrection does to a person? It makes them dangerous to despair. It turns a coward into a witness. It turns a failure into a messenger. It turns locked doors into temporary obstacles. It turns fear into fuel. That's what happened after Sunday morning. They didn't just celebrate. They changed. And that's what I feared more than any miracle, transformation. Because you can be amazed for a day and go back to your life unchanged. But if you are transformed, if you become someone who cannot be bought by fear, then my influence shrinks. So here's what I want you to understand, and I want you to feel it, not just know it. I thought I had won because I saw a cross, but I didn't see the garden. I didn't see the decision beneath the decision. I didn't see that surrender can be stronger than resistance. I didn't see that love can walk into suffering and come out holding keys. I didn't see that God can use my darkness like a stage for his light. And when Sunday morning arrived, it wasn't just a surprise, it was a verdict. A verdict against my oldest claim that death is final. So if you're listening to me right now and you're tired of fighting, tired of hoping, tired of being disappointed, hear this, even if it irritates you. The silence isn't always the end. The sealed place isn't always permanent. The story isn't finished just because you can't see the next page. Some mornings come quietly. Some stones move when no one is watching. Some victories look like losses until the light arrives. And if he could turn that Friday into a Sunday, then your Saturday has an expiration date. I hate that, but it's true. I thought I had won until Sunday morning. And if you stay with him long enough, if you keep walking even when your breath is thin, you might find that the moment you feared was the end, was only the beginning.